The Deseret Book Audio Library presents Your Faith Becometh Unshaken, Building Your Testimony Pyramid, a talk by S. Michael Wilcox. This talk was given before a live audience. And now, Michael Wilcox and his talk, Your Faith Becometh Unshaken, Building Your Testimony Pyramid.
A number of years ago, I came across an article called Cloudy Days in Tomorrowland. It was in Newsweek. It had a number of predictions of future events that were not going to happen, or decisions made by people about future things that later on I'm sure they regretted very much that they either sounded so silly, allowed something dangerous to develop, or missed out in a very great opportunity. So here are a few of them. I must confess that my imagination refuses to see any sort of submarine doing anything but suffocating its crew and floundering at sea. H.G. Wells, 1901. Airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value. Marshal Foch, French military strategist and future World War I commander, 1911. The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad. President of the Michigan Savings Bank advising Horace Rackham, Henry Ford's lawyer, not to invest in the Ford Motor Company. Rackham did not heed the advice in this particular instance, bought $5,000 worth of stock, and sold it several years later for $12.5 million. Believe me, Germany is unable to wage war. Former British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, August 1st, 1934. Who wants to hear actors talk? Harry M. Warner of Warner Brothers, 1927. There is no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home. Kenneth Olson, president and founder of Digital Equipment Corporation, 1977. Computers in the future may perhaps only weigh 1.5 tons. Popular Mechanics, 1949. We don't like their sound. Groups of guitars are on the way out. Decca Records rejecting the Beatles, 1962. Stocks have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. Irving Fisher, professor of economics, Yale University, October 17th, 1929. And a final one. Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. People will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box night after night. Darrell F. Zanuck, head of 20th Century Fox, 1946. Well, those were cloudy days in Tomorrowland for a lot of those people. Now, personally, I don't want cloudy days in my future because I make decisions or mistakes based on things that aren't true. I may, as I've seen many students do, throw away truth and assure themselves of cloudy days in the future, either here on earth or in an eternal sense, because they let go of things. They don't hang tightly to truths that you and I know to be firm in the gospel. Every day for the last 33 years, I have prayed for my children and now for my grandchildren, that they will not make similar decisions as those that we've heard, that they will stay true to the faith. I pray that every day for my students. I often say, Father in heaven, help my children, my grandchildren, my students hold true, stay firm when the faith shakers come in their lives. Now, I like the word faith shakers a little better than another word that sometimes we give these experiences or these people. In the Book of Mormon, we call them antichrists. But antichrist is a word, a name that almost doesn't mean anything anymore because it's so demonized. It's seen to be so evil. And there are 4 of them in the Book of Mormon, 4 major antichrists in the Book of Mormon. I call them faith shakers because if I ask a class of my students, how many of you have ever met an antichrist? I wouldn't get a single hand up. Maybe 1 out of 5 or 6 classes I might get. But if I ask my students, have you ever met someone who tried to shake your faith? Or have you ever had an experience in life that was a faith-shaking experience? And every hand is going to go up. We all have met faith shakers. And they come in different forms. In the Book of Mormon, there are 4 antichrists: Sherem, Nahor, Korihor, and Zoram. They're all different. They all have different teachings about salvation. Sherem says something else will save you. Nahor says everybody's going to be saved. Korihor says, saved from what? There is no sin. And Zoram says, we are saved and you are not saved. So there are a lot of different faith-shaking people and faith-shaking experiences. I take that expression, faith shakers, from Jacob's experience with Sherem. In the 7th chapter of Jacob, this is what he said. He had hoped to shake me from the faith, notwithstanding the many revelations and the many things which I had seen concerning these things. For I had truly seen angels, and they had ministered unto me. And also I had heard the voice of the Lord speaking unto me in very word from time to time. Wherefore, I could not be shaken. For myself, for my children, for my grandchildren, for my students, for all of you, I would hope that those last words of Jacob would be our words. I could not be shaken. But we do have experiences in life that may challenge us. Let me try and give you some examples that over the years I have found with students, myself sometimes, my family. I hope I hit all of you with them. I've tried to get enough that everybody here could relate to. Yes, I understand that can be a faith-shaking kind of experience. Sometimes our own behaviors may cause our faith to be shaken. There are times when it would be very convenient if the gospel were not true. Sometimes when we are chastened for something, maybe a parent, a bishop, a priesthood leader, that might shake our faith. We probably all know people. I know at least a dozen who are not active in the church, who believe it is not true because their own behaviors cause challenges in their life or certain repercussions to come from the church or those that they loved. Jacob said this, O my beloved brethren, give ear to my words. Remember the greatness of the Holy One of Israel. Do not say that I have spoken hard things against you. For if you do, you will revile against the truth. I have spoken the words of your Maker. I know that the words of truth are hard against all uncleanness. But the righteous fear them not. They love the truth and are not shaken. So sometimes our own behaviors may shake our faith a little bit. Sometimes trials in life can shake our faith. C.S. Lewis, a great defender of Christian truth, had such a faith-shaking trial in his life at the death of his wife. This is what he wrote about that time. Maybe some of you can relate to his thoughts. Meanwhile, where is God? This is one of the most disquieting symptoms. When you are happy, so happy that you have no sense of needing him, so happy that you are tempted to feel his claims upon you as an interruption. If you remember yourself and turn to him with gratitude and praise, you will be, or so it feels, welcomed with open arms. But go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain. And what do you find? A door slammed in your face and a sound of bolting and double bolting on the inside. After that, silence. You may as well turn away. The longer you wait, the more emphatic the silence will become. There are no lights in the windows. It might be an empty house. Was it ever inhabited? It seemed so once. And that seeming was as strong as this. What can this mean? Why is he so present, a commander in our time of prosperity, and so very absent, a help in time of trouble? Not that I am, I think, in much danger of ceasing to believe in God. The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about him. The conclusion I dread is not, so there's no God after all, but so this is what God is really like. Deceive yourself no longer. Lewis continues by saying, after the death of a friend years ago, I had for some time a most vivid feeling of certainty about his continued life, even his enhanced life. I have begged to be given even 100th part of the same assurance about H, his name for his wife in this account. There is no answer, only the locked door, the iron curtain, the vacuum, absolute zero. Them as asks don't get. I was a fool to ask, for now, even if that assurance came, I should distrust it. I should think it a self-hypnosis induced by my own prayers. Sometimes trials can be very faith-shaking events in our lives. Sometimes over-anxiety, worry, fear, focusing on a single thing, a single doctrine or event, may create a faith-shaking experience. Jacob himself also wrote, my beloved brethren, I will unfold this mystery unto you, if I do not by any means get shaken from my firmness in the Spirit and stumble because of my over-anxiety for you. We probably all know those moments of over-anxiety. Sometimes we'll come upon a teacher, a professor, an intellectual. We will read something. Often it is given in tones of mockery. You listen to the mocking tone of Korihor as he tells them that their belief in God is the effect of a frenzied mind. This derangement of your mind, he says, comes because of listening to old men, old authorities, old traditions of the fathers. I have many students who have come under the attack of that mockery, sometimes from different places and different sources. Apathy, fatigue, wearisomeness often shakes our faith. A recently returned missionary said to me, I don't know why I don't feel it so strongly anymore. Maybe I never did. Anti-Mormon literature. Sometimes we come across anti-Mormon literature. Almost always they're what I call a one-spoke wheel. A one-spoke wheel won't hold any weight. If we would just realize that. But someone will pull out a statement from Brigham Young or some scientific study, a verse in the Book of Mormon about horses or something, and they'll base their whole doubt, their whole faith, their whole testimony, or the attack against the church upon that one single spoke. If we really want to know what Brigham Young thought about something, we need to get all the statements he made about it. We put all the spokes in the wheel. I often say to the students, be careful you don't let a one-spoke wheel shake your faith. Questions about historical people or fact, polygamy, priesthood to every worthy male may shake faith. Scientific theories or challenges, evolution, DNA studies among the American Indians, Egyptology in the Book of Abraham. Sometimes we have misconceptions about our doctrinal stands when the church has never taken that stand. Sometimes it's cultural or traditional. When I was young, I believed that all the Native American people from Alaska, Tierra del Fuego, all were the descendants of Lehi. That's a very, very difficult position to defend. And it's never been the doctrine of the church. Maybe a traditional or a cultural belief, but never the doctrine. Lehi himself said, the Lord hath covenanted this land unto me and to my children forever, and also all those who should be led out of other countries by the hand of the Lord. The Book of Mormon itself allows for many more groups to come here. So sometimes, if we're not careful, we may assume something we feel we have to defend that we never have to defend anyway. Often leaders' weaknesses shake faith. Past leaders, present leaders, Joseph Smith, the bishop, one of the brethren, there is an assumption that they should be perfect. Can we allow men to be human in behavior, in thoughts, in opinions, in application of principles, in policies? We too are weak and frail. We hope others will make allowances for us. Can we not make them for our leaders? Political correctness often shakes faith. We question or oppose the stand of the church on gay marriage, abortion, women's issues, environmental things, or political parties. I know a student who feels she cannot be a good Latter-day Saint because she is of a political party, that she feels other members look questioningly at her because of her allegiance to it. Friends often shake our faith. Sometimes our beliefs can sound so silly, so incredible, in an atmosphere of those who do not share them with us. And that can sometimes be very, very difficult to overcome. Falling in love may shake faith. We see all things through the unstable lens of our romantic emotions. Life's unfairness and inconsistencies can shake faith, especially for those who have been righteous and often face Job-like experiences. And there is one final that I would share. It's what I call black hole moments. There are moments in life when it just seems like all the light is being sucked right out of me. All the faith, when it all looks so unbelievably incredible. I remember once being in Bryce Canyon looking up at the stars through a telescope and feeling infinitesimally small, knowing that in the solar system alone, 99.9% of all matter is in the sun. We are one tiny little dust speck. And how could I really believe that what happened on this little dust speck mattered to the creator of all that? Or that he would send his son to this particular dust speck? There are times, that's what I call the black hole moments, when it just seems like all my faith is being sucked out of me. When these moments come to us, and they will come. I hope I hit everybody. I probably spent longer on that than I should have. But I just want everybody to see, maybe one of them isn't yours. Maybe you're never troubled by a leader, but you might be troubled by a historical fact. Maybe you've never had a problem with a friend, but a professor at college challenged your faith. What we want to try to create is, like Jacob, a faith that cannot be shaken. Now, I'd like to try and build what I call the pyramid of faith with you here. If you could just picture in your mind a pyramid. A pyramid is the most stable of all structures. That's why they're still standing in Central America and Egypt and other places. We want a faith and a testimony that is shaped like a pyramid, broad-based. So if you can just picture in your mind a pyramid. We're going to divide it into 3 sections. The upper section we are going to call our testimony or our faith. This is the part where we say, I know. I know. I know that Joseph Smith is a prophet. I know that God lives. I know that Jesus is the Christ. I know we are led by living prophets today. It's the I know part of a testimony. Now, what does faith rest on? That second piece underneath, broader than the I know part, right? What upholds it? One of the finest definitions of faith anywhere is offered to us by Paul in Hebrews. This is what he said. Faith is the substance. Ooh, that's a great word. Substance. In the footnote, Joseph changes it to assurance. And the Greek validates that change and also adds the word basis or foundation. Faith is the substance. It's built on substance, assurance, basis. The substance of things hoped for, and then a wonderful word, the evidence of things not seen. So in that second section, I would write the words substance, assurance, evidence. In my years of teaching, I found that many, many Latter-day Saints believe that faith is built on kind of emotion and feelings. And that can be part of it. But I really love the words substance, assurance. What is evidence built on? The third, the bottom layer, the broad foundation of our pyramid of faith. I think we will find that evidence rests on three things. So in that bottom part, I would write the words reason, experience, and authority. My reason tells me this is true. My experience tells me this is true. I haven't had the experience, but I trust the authority or the experience or the reason of somebody else. That is a very solid kind of faith. Let's see if when Alma handles Korihor, Alma's kind of the faith shaker expert in the Book of Mormon, isn't he? He gets to handle Nahor, Korihor, and Zoram. I suppose there's something appropriate in that. He was once a faith shaker himself, so he gets to handle three of them. Jacob handles one, Sharon, but Alma does get to handle three of them. When he's talking to Korihor, he bears his testimony. Notice his pyramid. Alma said unto him, Believest thou that there is a God? And he answered, Nay. And Alma said unto him, Will ye deny again that there is a God, and also deny the Christ? For behold, I say unto you, I know there is a God, and also that Christ shall come. That's what we call testimony, right? We get up in testimony meeting, and we say, I know that God lives, I know that Jesus is the Christ, I know we're led by living prophets. That's what he's just done with Korihor. He's borne his testimony. And notice the word he uses next. And now, what evidence have ye that there is no God, or that Christ cometh not? I say unto you that ye have none, save it be your word only. Now, if I were Korihor right there, I would say, Alma, you stole my line. That's my line. That's what I say to you. That's not what you say to me. And sometimes we do. We let faith shakers back us into the corner, right, and say, prove, right? What evidence? And occasionally the very best strategy is to just go on the offensive and just turn it around. I had a daughter who was having her faith challenged in a university class by an individual who took great delight in the name of academic thought and broad-mindedness, in trying to destroy faith. And every week she'd call me on the telephone, say, Dad, he said this. And it sounds so good, I don't believe it, but it sounds good. And I would talk her out of it. And one day I said to her, if you're willing to maybe risk a little lower grade, challenge him. Don't let him get away with always putting you on the defensive. Almost every philosophical, it was a philosophy class, almost every philosophical question, right, you can do this too. So the next week she called me up and she was just thrilled. I said, what happened? She said, well, the question was, do we know that there are moral absolutes? And he was saying, we don't know that there is moral absolute. There is no proof that there are moral, ethical absolutes. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I raised my hand and I just quoted Alma's sentence and applied it. I said, now what evidence do you have that there are no moral absolutes? You don't have any evidence. It's just your word. I said, what happened? He said, oh, it was wonderful. The kids all got into it and they kept saying, yeah, what evidence do you have? And finally he had to admit there was no evidence for his point either. It is very comforting to know there is no evidence, there is no God. There is no evidence Jesus was not his divine Son. There is no evidence Joseph Smith did not see the Father and Son in the grove. There is no evidence the Book of Mormon is not a true account of ancient inhabitants. No evidence. Now, after having turned that around, Alma says, I will now give you my evidence, substance, assurance for my belief in God. Now, what Alma's doing is he's given us the top piece, right? I know. He is now going to say, and I know why I know. It is a very good exercise to sit down sometimes and say, these are the things I know, I affirm, I assert. And these are the reasons why I know that. To put the evidence, the substance, based on reason, authority, and experience. Notice his 4 evidences for the existence of God. Alma said unto him, thou hast had signs enough. Will ye tempt your God? Will ye say, show unto me a sign, when ye have, number 1, the testimony of all these thy brethren? Now, what Alma is calling upon here is something that I could do in this group here. I don't know you very well. Some of you I know a little bit, but not really well. But I think I could say to you, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think. And then I'm going to call on somebody. I want you to come up and share with us an experience in your life that told you there was a God and he was aware of you. And I believe that every one of you could come up with some simple, sweet little experience in life that told you that. Let me give you an example. When my daughter was 12 years old, we moved to Utah and she went into junior high school. Now, junior high school is just a horrible time to be alive. I believe junior high school was invented by Lucifer. It's a bad time. And she was very unhappy. She didn't feel she had any friends. Kind of picked on, persecuted somewhat, and she was a very unhappy little girl. And it didn't matter that Mom and Dad loved her because we had to. Well, she was preparing for a patriarchal blessing. We have our children receive their patriarchal blessing at age 13 to give them a kind of a help through very difficult years sometimes. She began to pray, independent, didn't tell anybody, that her Father in heaven would tell her that he loved her in her patriarchal blessing. Then she thought she could survive. Now, see, if she had told us, my faith is such that I probably would have primed the pump a little bit. I might have called the patriarch and said, this is the Spirit, you will tell Kirsten, right? But we didn't know. So she went and had that blessing, and on the way home, we asked her about it, how she felt. She told us what she'd been praying for. Now, the very first sentence of my daughter's patriarchal blessing is this: Kirsten, your Father in heaven is pleased with your desires to know of his feelings for you and of his love for you. Now, what'd that say to a 13-year-old girl? I'm aware of you. I know you. And that's a simple thing. But there are millions of them in and out of the church. And that's what Alma's saying. He is basing his evidence on the experience of thousands, right? Evidence number 2. And also the testimony of all the holy prophets. That's based on authority. I've never seen God, but I believe in those who have. There is a marvelous consistency in all of their testimonies and what they teach. Second evidence, the authority of the prophets. Third one, all things denote there is a God. Yea, even the earth and all things that are upon the face of it, yea, and its motion, yea, and also all the planets which move in their regular form, do witness that there is a supreme creator. My reason, Alma says, tells me you can't have all that order and beauty and not have something behind it. My favorite statement from Galileo is this, the man who first looked at all that order and traced it. He said, the sun with all those planets moving around it can ripen the smallest bunch of grapes as if it had nothing else to do but ripen the grapes. Why then should I doubt God's power? The earth is set at the exact distance from the sun so that just the tilting on its axis creates the seasons. Move it just a little bit further out and all life dies too cold. Move it just a little bit in and all life dies too warm. Those kinds of order. So we've got one that covers. Can you see what he's doing? Experience, authority, reason creates my evidence. Then he says, the scriptures are laid before thee. Fourth evidence, the very existence of the scriptures. Now they encompass all of them. The scriptures are filled with authoritative accounts. They create experience. Let me elaborate on that just a little bit. The scriptures will create experience. Remember that Jacob said at the beginning, we looked at Jacob's testimony. He said, he had hope to shake me from the faith, notwithstanding the many revelations and the many things which I had seen concerning these things. I had seen angels, they ministered unto me. I heard the voice of God speaking unto me in very word from time to time, wherefore I could not be shaken. Now that's in the 7th chapter. He's saying, revelation created unshaken faith. Is there someplace else in Jacob where we could find out what created the revelation? In the 4th chapter of Jacob, he gives us that piece. We search the prophets, and we have many revelations. What was the catalyst for the revelations? The searching of the prophets, the searching of the scriptures. We search the prophets, we have many revelations in the spirit of prophecy, and having all these witnesses, we obtain a hope, and our faith becometh unshaken. Searching prophets leads to revelatory experiences, leads to one. So the scriptures are useful in creating experiences. I think it's interesting that after Shem was silenced by Jacob, the people who had once been fooled by him begin to do something. It came to pass that peace and the love of God was restored again among the people, and they searched the scriptures and hearkened no more to the words of this wicked man. So the scriptures are full of authority. The scriptures create experiences. And the scriptures appeal to our reason. They work. The principles and the promises in them work when we truly live them. My reason tells me that somebody like Joseph Smith, with his learning and background, could not produce what he does. Whenever a student comes into the office having had a faith-shaking experience, a little troubled, often I will just sit them down and say to them, I just want you to listen, I'm going to read something to you. Now I pick different things at different times, but I will just read to them the words of Joseph Smith in some of the scriptures. Moses 1, Moses 7, Section 88, Section 93, 3 Nephi 17, 1 Nephi 8, 2 Nephi 2. Some of them very beautiful words, some of them very deep words, very powerful words. And you can just feel this calm settle in. And then it's a matter of often just saying, does a man who is a fraud, a deceiver, a pretender write such powerful words? In the footnote at the end of the Joseph Smith history, Oliver Cowdery describes his experience with section 13, the visit of John the Baptist. It's a one-verse section. But notice what he says about it. If what Oliver says is true about a one-verse section, what does it say about section 88, or Moses 7, or 1 Nephi 8, or section 93? He said this: "No, nor has this earth power to give the joy," notice what the scriptures do for us, "give the joy, to bestow the peace, or comprehend the wisdom," joy, peace, wisdom, "which was contained in each sentence as they were delivered by the power of the Holy Spirit. Man may deceive his fellow men. Deception may follow deception, and the children of the wicked one may have power to seduce the foolish and untaught, till naught but fiction feeds the many, and the fruit of falsehood carries in its current the giddy to the grave. But one touch with the finger of his love, yes, one ray of glory from the upper world, or one word from the mouth of the Savior, from the bosom of eternity, strikes it all into insignificance and blots it forever from the mind." Sometimes when the faith-shaking experiences come, we just have to read the words, feel the peace, receive the joy, comprehend the wisdom. I hate to see somebody give up faith by default when there is so much that could calm it. So the scriptures are Alma's fourth evidence. Can you see in that little exchange with Korihor how he's built that foundation? He knows, but more important, he knows why he knows. And the why he knows is based on reason, experience, and authority. And those are all open to us. Our challenge in life is to search for, create, if you wish, the evidence, the substance, to put underneath the I know what supports the I know. And Alma will tell us exactly how to do that in one of those powerful chapters that sometimes I read to the students when they are having trouble with their faith, or to my children, or to myself. Alma chapter 32. It's one of those places where you think, well, if Joseph made it up, we better give him credit for being a brilliant genius because there is so much power in it. I think Alma tells us almost as if he sees into our future world and says, I know that your world is going to be a post-scientific revolution world. Your world is going to be a world of empirical knowledge, of proof. And so I'm going to tell you how to create or search for or find evidence, and I'll do it in your world environment. Alma 32 has a number of ways I can approach it. I can approach it the agricultural way, the planting the seed and the tree growing, right, which is what he's doing, because he's talking to an agricultural society. But I'm going to pull off and create a scenario off of one of the other words Alma uses. The word is experiment. You all know that verse in Alma 32. Try and experiment upon my words. So let's just in our mind review very briefly the scientific method of discovery, because we're going to apply that method of discovery to create evidence and to support our testimonies. We could simplify it as best we can in 3 stages. You start with a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is usually almost always stated in positive terms. Positive terms. In other words, I'm not trying to disprove something, I'm trying to prove something. I start with my hypothesis. The hypothesis of Alma 32 is Jesus is the Christ. That's the issue at hand. Now, it doesn't matter what you put up in the hypothesis. Joseph Smith was a prophet. Gordon B. Hinckley is a living prophet today. Tithing is a true principle that creates financial security. There is a living God. The Book of Mormon is true. Whatever you put up there, that's what I'm trying to find out or ascertain or learn the truth for. In Alma's case, it's Jesus is the Christ. Then the second thing is experiment, right? Now there's different words we use for that. We gather data, we make observations, we test, we prove. So that's the second, experiment. That's what he wants us to do. And we're going to look at what he promises we will observe if we try his experiment. The third thing is conclusions, right? We come to conclusions. We take our observations and the data that we've gathered and the experiments we've run, and we make some conclusions. And then we take those conclusions back to the hypothesis and say, well, I have to change it or adapt it. Or I might look at it and say, based on what I've seen and observed, it looks like my hypothesis is true. Okay? That's the basic scientific method. Now, science has sometimes givens. At least I remember being taught that, some givens. So before we try Alma's experiment on any aspect of truth you want to know, let's see his four givens. He has four givens. Given number one, remember he's talking on the hill to a more aristocratic group, and a poor group comes up, and he turns around and faces the poor group and sees that they are in a greater preparation to listen to him. So he gives Alma 32 to that poor group. We read in the scriptures, he beheld that their afflictions had truly humbled them, and that they were in a preparation to hear the word. Given number one, if I want to find religious truth, if I'm going to do the experiment, I begin from a position of humility. Now, it doesn't matter to Alma whether I'm compelled to be humble or I'm humble on my own. It doesn't matter. I begin with humility. C.S. Lewis once said, a proud man will never find God, because a proud man is always looking down at everything. And in order to see God, you must look up. You must recognize there is something greater than you are. So given number one, if you're going to try the experiment to find religious truth, to find evidence, you begin in a state of humility. Given number two, Alma says, remember, God is merciful unto all who believe on his name. Therefore he desireth in the first place that ye should believe, yea, even on his word. Given number two, God wants you to believe. He wants you to find truth. Now maybe somebody would say, well, what if my hypothesis is there a God? Well, if that is your hypothesis, then assume that if there is one, he wants you to know, and it'll still work. Given number three, now he imparteth his word by angels unto men. Yea, not only men, but women also. Now this is not all. Little children do have words given unto them many times, which confound the wise and the learned. Given number three, not only does he want you to know truth, he will tell you truth. And it doesn't matter whether you're man, woman, or child. I can't say, well, God reveals to men, but he won't reveal to me I'm a woman. He says, I'll reveal to women. Well, I'm just a child. He'll reveal to adults. No, men, women, children. I'm humble. I remember God wants me to know truth. He will teach me truth. And the fourth given, maybe the most important one of all. Alma says, now as I said concerning faith, that it was not a perfect knowledge, even so it is with my words. There is such a release for many members of the church in these next few words. Ye cannot know of their surety at first unto perfection, any more than faith is a perfect knowledge. Ye cannot know of their surety at first unto perfection. Almost every one of my children sometime in their life have come to me and said, Dad, I'm not sure I know the church is true. Now, I try not to panic, as a parent might at such a moment, and we sit down and we talk. And I have discovered, and this is true of adults, not just my children or my students at the university, I have discovered that we kind of have this idea that you know or you don't know. And so people get up in testimony meeting and they say, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are a few phrases that I would eliminate from church vocabulary. That's probably one of them. It tends to create guilt, right? I'm not sure how big a shadow of a doubt is. I'm not sure I would recognize a shadow of a doubt. I'm sure that I have had shadows of doubt cross my life. That we get this idea that it's all or nothing. I know or I don't know. I pray and God tells me and I have a perfect knowledge. And Alma's saying you can't. I can't, if we word it this way, I can't go from hypothesis to law overnight, can I? In Alma's analogy, I can't go from seed to harvesting fruit from the tree overnight. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to know some things, but it releases me from this attempt, this all or nothing. I know it or I don't know it. When I was a bishop, so many times the young men would be a little bit nervous about going into the field, and they would often say, I can't look at people and say, I know. Now, again, as we talked with them, they did know things. I remember a conversation with my daughter when she came and sat on the bed and in tears said, Dad, I don't have a testimony. I don't know the church is true. She was 14. Again, I tried not to panic. And we just talked. I just said, how do you feel about Joseph Smith and about Jesus? And she had a wonderful testimony. She just thought she had to have it unto perfection at age 14. So that's the fourth given. I can't know for surety at first. Now, if I accept those four givens, I'm ready to test my hypothesis. Alma says, if you will awake and arouse your faculties, even to an experiment upon my words, and exercise a particle of faith, yea, even if ye can no more than desire to believe. Notice it's the positive. Remember, the hypothesis is stated as a positive. Nobody is absolutely, totally, and completely objective about anything. We carry too much bias with us. I know people like to say, well, I'm objective. And there seems to be this idea that if you're on the negative, that's the objective side. So people might say, well, you can't really judge Mormonism true because you are a Mormon. And I would say, well, why does not being a Mormon make you more objective than being one? Right? So mankind has decided, because we can't be absolutely, totally objective about anything, that it is better, if I'm going to err on either side, the positive or the negative, to err on which side? On the positive, right? So Alma says, desire to believe. In a court of law, you are innocent until proven guilty, right? I'm just going to, if I can't get total objectivity, I'm just going to err on the positive, that's all. Desire to believe. Let this desire work in you until you believe in a manner you can give place for a portion of my words. Now we will compare the word unto a seed. Now if you give place that a seed may be planted in your heart, behold if it be a true seed or a good seed. I just would point out that from this time on, Alma drops the word true and uses only the word good. He'll use it 12 times. Sometimes it was easier for my children and my students to say, I know there is goodness in this church, in this book, in this belief, in this man, in Joseph Smith. I don't have perfect knowledge of truth totally, but I know there is goodness. If you look, you'll see he uses the word good every single time from this point out. We're not saying that we don't know things and can't know they're true also. We're just emphasizing another word that can be used that is often removes a little bit of pressure from people. Now he says this: if it is a good seed, it will do 4 things for you. 4 things. And each of them has the word begin in front of it, because it's not a perfect knowledge, remember, at first. Every time it will begin to do this for you. In the church, we tend to emphasize number 1. I'd like to point out there are 3 other things. And sometimes, based on who you are and what your personality is, you might respond to number 3 more than number 1, or number 2 more than number 4. Now, we want all of them, because all of them make the foundation of the pyramid. But there are 4 things. Let's see what they are. He says, it will begin to swell within your breasts. Now that's the one we generally talk about. You'll know the truth by this feeling in the bosom, right? You will have a spiritual, physical response to truth. I don't like the word emotional too much. Emotions are pretty unstable, right? So I would rather say you'll have a spiritual, physical, you'll feel things if it is good, if it is true. Now, if that phrase doesn't work for you, then you pick another one. It's trying to explain something that is difficult to explain. Sometimes we'll say, well, have you ever felt a swell in your breast? And I'm, well, gee, I don't know if I've ever felt that. Well, how about a burning in the bosom? No, I don't know if I've ever had that. How about a quaking in the bones? That was Joseph Smith's. I don't think my bones have ever quaked. Right? Have you ever felt joy about it? Peace, enlightenment. Well, now those I can work with a little bit better maybe. Whatever works, you'll have a physical, spiritual response to truth. That's the first one. Then he says, when you feel these swelling motions, ye will begin to say within yourselves, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good. See that emphasis on good? For it beginneth to enlarge my soul. That's the second thing. It'll enlarge the soul. Now, I take that to mean I'll have a behavioral response to truth. If it is good, if it is true, I ought to be a better person because of it. Let me give an example of the enlarging of the soul. When I was in the mission field in France, we baptized a couple. It was a tiny little petite French woman, just teeny. And she was married to a stereotypical male macho husband who was a bit of a bully. They had 2 little boys. They were afraid of that father. You could see it. You got in that house, you could feel the tension, the fear of the wife and the children of not saying something that would upset Dad. Now, this man took to the gospel like a duck to water. 2 weeks they were going to be baptized. On the day of their baptism, this wife came to me and she said, Elder Wilcox, I thought you should know I am filing for divorce from my husband. My children and I are afraid of him. I don't want my children to live that way always. But I won't tell him, because if I tell him, it will be very bad. And then she said this, but I have never seen him take to a religion or to anything like he has to your church. So I'm going to give your church 1 year to change my husband. If it's right, if it's true, it will change you. That's a challenge. Is that true? Was her assumption true? If it's a good seed, it ought to enlarge the soul. I was transferred. I came back more than a year later. They were still married. I thought that was a good sign. I went to see the family. They were still active. She was pregnant. I thought that was a good sign. I asked her, what happened? How are things? She said, oh, you'll have to see it. My husband will be home in a half hour. Half hour later, he came in. The little boys were playing in the corner. As he came in, they jumped up and ran to him. That tension was gone in the house. Now he was still rough, but the gospel was enlarging his soul. Some people feel the church is true because they've had that burning in the bosom answers to prayer. And some people believe it's true because it just makes them good people. And they look around and they just see good people, the enlarging of the soul. The third thing, yea, it beginneth to enlighten my understanding. That's an intellectual response to the truth. Later on, Alma will state it this way: your understanding doth begin, notice always begin, to be enlightened. Your mind doth begin to expand. I should have a mental response to truth. Answers should come to questions. Things should make sense. Remember, one of the blocks of our foundation is the block of reason. I should have a mental, intellectual response. I remember a sister once coming up to me saying, I'm very worried about my husband. I don't think he has a testimony of the gospel. And the man was active, and so we talked a little bit. I said, well, is he temple recommend holder? Yes. Does he go to church? Yes. Does he teach your family? Oh, he's great with the kids. What's the problem? He's never felt the burning in the bosom. Now, I happen to know this individual. He was a thinker, and the focus and the foundation of his testimony was in his mind. Now, is the heart a greater gauge than the mind? We want both, right? But this particular individual responded to the truth in a more enlightening of understanding way than swelling in the breasts way. And the fourth thing, yea, it beginneth to be delicious to me. When something is delicious, you don't have to choke it down. It tastes good. Later on, Alma will say, after you have tasted this light, it's a great phrase, to taste light. Normally we see light, but you taste light. It's delicious. You want more, so the gospel should create a hunger to want more. If you're an investigator trying to learn about the church and the missionaries, you're newly married or you've been married all your lives and devoted to one another, and the missionary says, do you know that a revelation was given to Joseph Smith that taught that the love between a husband and a wife is a holy, sanctified thing and will continue beyond the grave. They will be husbands and wives. Families are forever. And when that is taught to you, the response ought not to be, oh, yuck, that's a horrible thought. Right? The response should be, ooh, that tastes good. Tell me more. Do you understand delicious? Actually, if you put the first letter of the four things, swell, enlarge, enlighten, delicious, what have you spelled? Seed. That's enough to make me a believer in the Book of Mormon for the rest of my life, right? Actually, it doesn't work in any other language, so I figured the Book of Mormon's truer in English maybe than anything else. Those are the four things. Now, Alma says, this is what you will observe, right, about your hypothesis. This is the data you will gather. It's swelling, enlarging, enlightening, and delicious. Now I come to conclusions, right? And here's his conclusions. Would not this increase your faith? I say unto you, yea. Nevertheless, it hath not grown up to a perfect knowledge. It's not a law testimony yet. But behold, as the seed swelleth and sprouteth and beginneth to grow, then you must needs say the seed is good. It swells and sprouts and begins to grow. Will not this strengthen your faith? Yea, it will strengthen your faith. For you will say, I know. Those are the words of testimony, right? You can still say, I know. I know this is a good seed. I know there is goodness in the Book of Mormon, in Joseph Smith, in the living prophets, in the church, in the belief in Christ, in anything you are trying to ascertain the truth of. I know this is a good seed. Are you sure this is a good seed? Alma says. I say unto you, yea, for every seed bringeth forth unto its own likeness. If a seed groweth, it is good, but if it groweth not, it is not good. You cast it away. Now behold, is your knowledge perfect? Yea, your knowledge is perfect in that thing. In the first round of experimenting, right? Now what would we think of the scientist who conducted one set of experiments and immediately went to publish his findings as though he had discovered some great eternal truth? We would say, no, what do? You go back and you do it again, right? And again, and again, and again. You just keep gathering data and making observations and experimenting. And that's what Alma tells us to do. He says, after you have tasted this light, is your knowledge perfect? Behold, I say unto you, nay. Neither must you lay aside your faith, for you have only exercised your faith to plant the seed, to try the experiment to know if the seed was good. Maybe all I know at this point is that there is goodness in this belief or teaching. Behold, as the tree begins to grow, you will say, let us nourish it with great care, that it may get root, that it may grow up and bring forth fruit unto us. And now behold, if you nourish it with much care, it will get root and grow up and bring forth fruit. But if you neglect the tree and take no thought for its nourishment, it will not get any root. And when the sun cometh and scorcheth it, when the faith shakers come, they will shake it because it has no foundation. Alma is telling us how to create evidence. But I've got to do it again and again, right? I take those conclusions back to my hypothesis and I say, I haven't seen anything yet that makes me believe that what I thought was true isn't true. I'll continue to observe and gather data. There's a very beautiful poem that Robert Frost wrote that I think about when I try to visualize my own pyramid and making it strong enough not to be shaken, my own life. It's called Into My Own, and the idea is he's going into a grove of trees, but the trees represent the deep things inside his own heart and mind. He says, one of my wishes is that those dark trees, so old and firm they scarcely show the breeze, were not as 'twere the merest mask of gloom, but stretched away unto the edge of doom. I should not be withheld, but that some day into their vastness I should steal away, fearless of ever finding open land, or highway where the slow wheel pours the sand. I do not see why I should e'er turn back, or those should not set forth upon my track to overtake me, who should miss me here, and long to know if still I held them dear. And then the final. They would not find me changed from him they knew, only more sure of all I thought was true. That's what I feel about the gospel. I've had faith-shaking experiences just like all of you. But I've never found anything or experienced anything that made me feel, the deeper I got into the gospel, that the things that my mother taught me were true as a child were not true. Henry David Thoreau said, I know that I am. I know that another is whose creature I am, and yet in some sense whose kindred I am. I know the enterprise is worthy. I know things work well. I have heard no bad news. I've heard no bad news about the gospel. The more I learn, the more I study, the more the reason, the more the authority, the more the experiences, continue to create the evidence. Now, by way of maybe a practical application, I began by expressing a prayer that I often, every day I've prayed it since my children were born. I continue to pray it, that when the faith-shaking experiences come in their lives, they will have a firm and solid foundation, that nothing will be able to shake their faith. Oh, a few stones may roll off here and there. We all have that. Some of the stones need to be rolled off occasionally. But the building will stand. So where do I, as a parent, as a grandparent, what can I do as a teacher of young adults? Well, certainly for our children and grandchildren, we can lay the foundation of authority. Almost all of our testimonies begin with authority. The trust in a parent, the trust in a grandparent, that what they believe to be true is true. In the lectures on faith, Joseph Smith has a beautiful description of the passing on of faith from Adam down to Abraham. It's in the second lecture on faith. And the very last verse of that lecture kind of tells me what I as a parent need to do to help my children create their own pyramid, to be there as they lay the first foundation stones. This is what Joseph said. We have now clearly set forth how it is and how it was that God became an object of faith for rational beings, and also upon what foundation the testimony was based, which excited the inquiry and diligent search of the ancient saints to seek after and obtain a knowledge of the glory of God. And we have seen that it was human testimony, and human testimony only, that excited this inquiry in the first instance in their minds. It was the credence they gave to the testimony of their fathers. This testimony having aroused their minds to inquire after the knowledge of God. The inquiry frequently terminated, indeed always terminated, when rightly pursued in the most glorious discoveries and eternal certainty. That's what I want for my children, for my students, for my grandchildren now. That's what you want for those you love. You want them to have glorious discoveries and eternal certainty. And Joseph is saying that the spark that begins the questioning, the experimenting, the observing, the gathering of data is the testimony of the parents, of the fathers in the first instance. In that same lecture, Joseph uses the expression, what it was that stirred up the faith of multitudes to feel after God. I just love that phrase. As a father, that is what I need to do for my children. I need to stir up the faith to feel after God. And what is the greatest thing, catalyst for stirring up faith? It is testimony. Next to life itself, which a mother gives a child, the greatest gift you can give a child is the gift of your testimony. So I continue to try and broaden my pyramid, if not only for my own sake, but understanding that my children's pyramid in large measure will begin from that. May we have the ability to resist all faith shakers, whatever it may come, in whatever form. May we not see cloudy days tomorrow because we made foolish decisions today to throw something away when we didn't need to, that we'll hold tightly to those things. In the Shakespeare play Pericles, Shakespeare wrote these beautiful words I conclude with. Truth can never be confirmed enough, though doubts did ever sleep. May all your doubts be put to rest. May all your truths be confirmed. May you be able to say, I know. And more important, I know why I know, based on the evidence, which is based on reason, experience, and authority. Is my prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
This concludes this presentation of Your Faith Becometh Unshaken, Building Your Testimony Pyramid, a talk by S. Michael Wilcox. Recorded and edited by Kenny Hodges. Executive producer Corey Maxwell. This has been a production of the Deseret Book Audio Library.